You all know the story. Izuku Midoriya becomes the greatest hero and is passed down one for all and from All Might becomes the greatest hero, even though the anime is not done yet. But that is not this story. What's up, you jackwagons? I am Speed Fury, and I am back with a brand new What If. What if Izuku, or what if Deku, had a copy quirk? Now, I bet you're thinking, oh, this is just going to be a better version of Monoma's quirk. No, not going to be that kind of quirk. Now, we start off with how Izuku looks. Now, he looks like he normally does, but instead of his skin being normally colored, his skin is pink. Now, why is it pink? Well, for those of you who have probably read the title and may or may not have figured it out by now, you'll know. But I won't be revealing what exactly his pink skin has to do with his copy quirk. Time skip ahead to about when he's 4, and this is when he's just kind of sitting at the dinner table with his mother. His quirk had yet to manifest, and they assumed it would have something to do with his skin color, but it never manifested. Even Bakugo was getting worried. Unlike in canon, Bakugo is actually a good person here, and gets along with Izuku because he actually knows that Izuku is going to have a quirk, but he doesn't know what that quirk is going to be. For a while, most of them thought it was a mutation quirk, but no, it's not a mutation quirk because other than the pink skin, he still looks normal for the most part. It wasn't until Izuku's mother placed his favorite food in front of his face, and in his excitement, he opened his mouth way larger than it should have than a little kid's mouth should have any business opening up, and sucked all the food and the bowl inside his mouth and swallowed it whole. Seeing what he just did, his mother immediately celebrated that his quirk was some kind of vacuum quirk. Izuku was more along the lines of shocked at how he just ate a whole bowl and didn't feel any different for it. He also didn't seem to have changed in appearance, as though the bowl just vanished after going into his mouth. Deciding to take Izuku to the doctor, they went to the best quirk and best I don't know what the term would be for it, the best quirk doctor to see what Izuku's quirk would be. Now, I'm also going to mention that half of Class 1A is also going to have different quirks. They're not going to have the same ones they had in canon. And I'm doing this because I want them to all, at least half the class, to have better versions of their quirks. After examining the Izuku for a while and and not doing the toe joint thing, because that's a dumb way to tell someone has a quirk in my opinion, even though I wouldn't know if that's an actual thing. They did some tests. Izuku's body seemed to be very malleable, very stretchy for being, a little kid and for not looking much different. The strangest part was his seemingly bottomless stomach. While he didn't have like an endless amount of hunger, he could eat as much as he wanted and not get fat from it. It was when the doctor wasn't paying attention to Izuku that Izuku noticed a small scalpel on the table. Izuku, not knowing what it was, or not knowing that it was a dangerous tool, and out of curiosity and for some strange instinct, decided to inhale it, which he did, which the doctor realized last second that he just put an entire scalpel in his mouth and started panic, until Izuku began to glow. To everyone's shock, a strange elf-looking hat appeared on Izuku's head, and a sword appeared in his hand. Now, normally, directly after a little kid eats what is essentially a dangerous and sharp tool, people will be panicking, but upon seeing his weird transformation with the sword and with the hat on the sword, they realized how interesting his quirk actually was. It wasn't normal for a quirk to be, like this. Normally when a quirk has like a whole eating thing with it, it normally has a strange ability to, just do that, pretty much eat anything, but they weren't expecting him to actually be able to get anything else out of it. This was new for them. A quirk that allowed him to sort of give him power depending on what he ate. Whatever it was, it was great, because that meant he had a sword now, and maybe he could do it with other things too. And my pictures! One second. I'm just gonna... There, now they won't fall off this time. Deciding to take him to the target room, or the practice room, they decided to test out his quirk, with Izuku surprisingly knowing how to use the sword right off the bat, as though he's been an expert with it. His skills consisted of him being able to slash multiple times with the sword, as well as dash forward at high speed. He could also charge directly upward with the sword before following it up with a slam into the ground in the same motion. You know, like this. He could even charge the blade, which was surprising. The blade had two versions of the charge, though. One where he stayed on the ground and just span in a circle, and one where he jumped up in the air after charging it, which caused him to spin into like a tornado-like fashion. Although the strangest thing about the sword was the fact that it could shoot beams of light out of it. Unfortunately, though, after Izuku took a bit of damage, they realized that it only works if Izuku hasn't actually taken any damage. Otherwise, he wouldn't really be able to do much. Izuku took a bit more damage, and this caused his ability to disappear, which was rather strange, but then they realized if Izuku takes too much damage, it could possibly cause him to lose the power. They didn't know if he could get it back, though. So, trying something, they pulled out a smaller box cutter, and Izuku inhaled that. Surprisingly, it gave him the exact same power back. So this meant that he could easily just regain the power if he ate something else that was similar. It just, if he took too much damage again, he would lose the power again. Wanting to try the experiments with other forms of different items, they decided to try something else. Izuku spotted a yo-yo up on top of a shelf, but he couldn't reach it. On instinct, his body began to increase in size until he looked like a puffed up balloon, which surprised his mother at first, but then even more surprised him when he started wiggling what small arms he had now, and he started flying, or sort of like bounce flying or whatever it was. He went up to the yo-yo, grabbed it, and then ate it. The yo-yo, a weird baseball cap appeared on his head, which was rather strange for him, and a bandage appeared on the right side of his face. The yo-yo in his hand was now much bigger than it was before, and he could do multiple things now. Trying out the yo-yo attacks, he ended up being able to use it, well, like a yo-yo. It wasn't exactly what most people would expect when it came to, well, being able to use a yo-yo as a weapon. Although his walk the dog tactic was kind of scary, considering that he could just, it was able to slice through mostly anything, despite it being not looking that harmful. These different abilities that he had with the yo-yo were rather strange. The strangest one was when he used the yo-yo like a pole vaulting pole and launched himself in the air while spinning. Oh. Like that. He could also do it going forward. He would spin on top of the yo-yo with his hands, while doing a significant amount of damage to wood structures and other things like that. The doctor knew he wouldn't be able to keep Izuku around for long, as he probably wanted to experiment with his quirk some more, but he would need to make sure to get permission, so he tried something else. He gave Izuku a glass of water and asked him to not drink it, but to inhale it. Izuku, not really knowing how this would help, as he didn't think that water would really affect him, decided to drink it and see what would happen. Unfortunately, this did not really lead to any results. So this time, the doctors reminded him to inhale it this time, to which he did. Surprisingly, it did trigger something. A strange crown-like structure appeared on his head, and his hair turned into water. And it was weird because the water looked more like jelly, the way it was moving around on his head. But what was even stranger is that when he moved around as though he was on roller skates. The water under his feet acting as though he was, well, roller skating. He could even stop roller skating and go into a skid, and it would turn into a surfboard for him. He could shoot little water droplets out of his mouth that were actually quite big once they left his mouth. He could spray a small fountain of water downward, which was strong enough to propel him upward into the air. And he can control where he went with it. He could also use the weird jelly water thing on his head and shoot it upwards like a geyser. Unfortunately, though, this wasn't a ability that he could do forever, as it did cost a lot of his stamina. The final trick he tried to do was try to surf on a wave. Not like the wave that he was currently surfing on, but a bigger wave. That could actually be considered a wave. So he tried it. To his surprise, it worked. He created a larger wave that he was able to ride on for a brief amount of time. Realizing how much potential his quirk had, the doctor chose to keep it between them. He didn't want people knowing what Izuku's power was, let alone the government, as they could probably, if they got a hold of him, they could probably use him for more unpleasant wants and misdeeds. We all know the government can't be trusted. When Izuku came back to daycare, he didn't have an ability active at the moment, or a copied ability. And Bakugo wanted to know if he had found his quirk yet, and Izuku said yes, he had discovered his quirk. Bakugo, excited, wanted to see this new quirk, but Izuku didn't know how to activate it this time around, as he didn't know what he could do. He didn't want to use the same abilities he had before. He wanted to try out a new one. He already tried water, sword, and what was the other one I did? And yo-yo. He wanted to try something else. A thought then came to him, and he asked Bakugo if he could use an explosion and aim at his mouth. Bakugo wasn't sure about this, as he didn't want to hurt Izuku, but Izuku said, "It's fine, just aim for my mouth." Because he was a little kid and didn't think too much of it, Bakugo did so, but was shocked when Izuku opened his mouth and inhaled the explosion. Surprisingly to everyone, a weird crown-like thing that looked kind of like a siren appeared on his head. Izuku didn't know what this power was, but knowing that it had something to do with Bakugo's explosion, he probably shouldn't do it inside. So he and the other students went outside to test it out, but Izuku told everyone to back up, as he felt that activating this power might be a lot more dangerous than he thinks. So everyone did so, and Izuku activated the quirk, causing an enormous explosion to go off, destroying everything around him within about a 10-foot radius. Surprisingly, though, his power went away after using it. This upset Izuku, as that meant that some of his powers might only be a one-time use due to how powerful they actually are. Bakugo was excited that Izuku had a similar power to his, but Izuku said that it was more than that, and that he could actually sort of copy powers, as long as he had, well, something to eat. Bakugo asked what kind of thing, and Izuku didn't really know. He said that his power to pick it was random, and he'd only done it 4 times, with the weird new power being the 4th time. Bakugo and the other students were excited. They wanted to see what else Izuku could do. Normally, Bakugo would be a bit jealous that Izuku could just copy other people's quirks, but this was more than this wasn't copying other people's quirks. This was making his own version of whatever he ate, or something like that. One of the students came up with a stick, wanting to see if Izuku could copy whatever a stick would give him. Izuku tried, and it worked. A weird hat appeared on his head, and a long red staff appeared in his hands. He tried to use the staff and realized that it could actually stretch longer than he thought it would. Similar to the story of the Monkey King, how a staff could just extend. He tried to pole vault with it, and surprisingly, the staff was also extremely bendy, allowing him to pole vault himself. He tried to charge it up like he did with the sword. Unfortunately, he couldn't do that. He tried to throw the staff directly upwards, and it started spinning in the air. To make things even funnier, it seems that he could just respawn them multiple times and just keep throwing them up in the air. This would be very useful for when he has to defend himself from up above. He could also extend the staff in any direction he chose to. This was a good form of him being able to actually use ranged attacks without having to, shoot stuff. He began running forward and then realized that he could only charge it when he was running forward. He released it, and the staff extended way longer than it did before. Excited about this, Izuku then asked one of his friends to, well, hit him. They asked why, and he said that was the only way he was actually able to get rid of the power, as far as he knew so far. Bakugo just looked at him quizzically and said, "Why don't you just think about not having the power?" Izuku never thought he would have thought of doing this, so tried, and the power disappeared. But strange as it was, instead of the power just being were gone, a weird star began bouncing around. The star had a weird staff symbol in the center of it, and he wondered why that was happening. It was only a few more seconds until the star just disappeared. Izuku just shrugged, thinking that must be what happens whenever he just ditches a power. He hoped he could use it later, though. One girl brought a feather over to him, seeing if he could get some kind of bird power from that. And surprisingly, he could. He grew wings and tail feathers and a weird crest of plumage on his head. He could fly around better than he could when he puffed himself up like a balloon, and he could shoot feathers out of his wings. He could also charge forward with air surrounding him. This quirk was very exciting for a lot of the students. This wasn't a quirk that you normally see. It was very versatile, and it did have its limits, but it was still an amazing quirk, and Bakugo couldn't wait to actually, work with Izuku in the field. When he was told about the sword ability, Bakugo wanted to see the sword, so Izuku found a sharp object and inhaled it, getting his sword ability back. However, the strangest thing was after getting the sword, Bakugo decided he wanted to test and see how durable it was. Izuku, having no problems with this as he could just get a new power from it, held the sword out to Bakugo, and what really shocked everybody was when Bakugo used an explosion on the sword. Instead of the sword breaking in any way, it seemed to absorb the fire, transforming into a flame-shaped sword. Realizing that Izuku could power up his abilities by using other people's quirks, and Bakugo realizing that he could actually assist Izuku way better this way, and that they could be even be way better partners. This was very exciting for both of them. They decided to try it out with multiple quirks. Unfortunately, the only person who had a quirk that could actually affect Izuku's weapons, or his sword and yo-yo, was Bakugo, as nobody else had an elemental quirk, which disappointed Izuku a little bit, as he couldn't use other forms of elemental blades or weapons unless somebody else had an elemental quirk, like Bakugo, and it seemed to only work with the elemental weapons. Time skipped to a few years ahead, not to right before the events of the Sludge Villain, but just a little bit ahead. Izuku had decided to take on, eating challenges. He knew he could win. It wouldn't be that hard for him, considering that, he could literally eat as much as he wanted, and whatever he wanted, without actually changing in appearance. The first food eating challenge he came to already had a champion, however. This champion was a rather large man. He was very much noticeably big, but he was also very fit, surprisingly, for being someone so large. He wore a red fur robe around his body and had a strange hat that made him look somewhat like Santa Claus. He didn't have a beard, but he wore yellow mittens on his hands and wore a strange patterned outfit. There was also a hammer sitting behind the chair he was sitting on. The man's hair was blue and was very, it looked like he needed to do his hair, basically. When Izuku beat his first attempt at a food eating contest, this got the attention of said man, who immediately saw Izuku as a rival. Not because of Izuku's ability, because surprisingly he could do that exact same thing, except he couldn't copy abilities. Izuku finally made it to fight the champion to see if he could beat him. The champion, unlike normally, who had a bored expression because nobody could actually give him a challenge, looked at Izuku and gave a smirk before saying, "So, I finally found a worthy opponent, did I?" The man was noticeably American, surprisingly, and the Texan accent was kind of funny. "Well then, you little Kirby vacuum, let's see if you can beat the champ." Plate after plate of food was put in front of the two contestants. However, surprisingly to the champion, Izuku was beating him by a lot. Seemingly not even changing in terms of look. He just kept eating and never seeming to get full. Surprisingly to everyone, it was the champion who forfeited, saying, "I know when I'm beat. Dang, kid. I ain't never seen someone eat so much and not get full. As for me, I need to take a nap." And that's just what he did. Fell asleep directly where he was standing, face planting into the table. Izuku didn't know this, but he had inspired the champion to try harder. While the champion did have what looked like a similar quirk to Izuku's, his quirk wasn't exactly the same. He could inhale enough to make himself grow bigger, or inhale somebody or something into his body before spitting them back out at a high speed. He couldn't do anything else beyond that, though. However, this is what his quirk was called. His quirk was called air suction. He could use this ability to basically fly, or as a way of defense or attack. He didn't use this power for much fighting, but hearing that this boy wanted to be a hero, somewhat inspired the champion to also see if he could go about getting himself into the hero business, despite the fact that he's too old for being a hero course student. Maybe he could start as a vigilante, although he would have to do some work. He didn't carry that hammer around for nothing, but he did need to do some more work to actually be able to allow him to move around more freely. Time to skip ahead a little bit more, and Izuku and the former champion, who was now known as Triple D, had pretty much become equal in terms of being able to beat contests of eating food. However, Izuku had to relinquish his title, as it was time for him. It was coming around the time where he had to go into being a hero. He wanted to go into UA High, and Triple D wished him luck. As Katsuki and Izuku stood out of the gates of UA, excited for their hero course, they noticed a brown-haired girl walk by them. She was wearing a strange red cap on her head. Izuku called out to her in greeting, and the girl introduced herself as Ochako Uraraka. She said that her power was strange. At first, she thought it was simply that she could jump really high, but then she realized it was more than that. And similarly to Izuku, surprisingly, it depended on stuff that she ate. Although what she ate didn't only affected her with certain items. To show him, she pulled out a small mushroom out of her pocket. The mushroom was mostly red in color with a few white spots. Without any hesitation, she ate it in one bite and then grew to twice her height. She was stronger and able to jump higher, but taking any amount of damage would cause her to lose the power, so she had to learn how to dodge. Izuku was very excited that he had a friend that was so, similar to him, in terms of how her powers worked. The power wasn't clearly as strong, as Izuku had to take a few good hits before he actually lost the power, but he could tell that she had done some work before coming to UA. As they got to the auditorium, Izuku noticed a blue-haired boy who was wearing glasses. He was tapping his foot rather quickly, as though he wanted to be out of there and go out and do something. The blue-haired boy looked familiar somehow to Izuku. He couldn't place it, but the hair color and the overall stature looked familiar. He didn't know where he'd seen him before. Maybe it wasn't him, but somebody who looked similar. Unlike in canon, Ida does not interrupt Present Mike from doing his whole test thing. But he is put into the same test field as both Uraraka and Ida. Uraraka and Izuku. Izuku, noticing the same boy from before, who was tapping his foot rather impatiently, walked over to see if he was okay. The boy saying he doesn't do well holding still for very long. His power is very similar to his older brother Tensei Ida, which immediately caught Izuku's attention, cutting off the boy, saying, "Oh, you're Ingenium's little brother." The boy simply nodded before saying, "But unlike him, I don't have the same engine quirk. My power is more along the lines of just an inner power." He noticed that Ida did not have any exhaust pipes on him whatsoever, meaning that he did in fact not have the engine quirk, but he said his power was similar. He then pointed to his hair and showed that his hair was a lot spikier than normal. Izuku asked why the spiky hair, and Ida said that his hair is naturally spiky and he can't get it to really be any other hairstyle but that. And unfortunately, one of the side effects of his strange power is that he can't really hold still for too long. He loves to run. He loves to run around. His quirk was seemingly was a kind of mutation quirk mixed with an emitter quirk. A small boy with purple spiky mohawk then walked up to the two, saying that he also had a mutation quirk, but unlike theirs, his quirk was a bit more noticeable. He pointed to the two orange horns poking out of his head, as well as the long purple tail with the orange spike on the end of it. He also had two small orange wings coming out of his back. He said that his power was called Purple Dragon, and that he didn't really it didn't really describe what he could actually do, but his powers were more than just being a purple dragon. He also said that unfortunately, though, it also affects his size, as it makes him shorter than most people. Unfortunately, the group was cut off as prison marks shattered for them to start, with Izuku, Ida, and the small purple spiky-haired boy all running out. Surprisingly, the purple-haired boy was a lot faster than they thought he would be, but he was running on all fours, and his back legs seemed to look more along the lines of dragon talons. His horns also extended out into curved horns as he rammed into multiple robots, destroying them in a single charge attack. Ida began to jump into the air and then curled himself into a ball as he smashed through multiple other robots. Him having some kind of strange, what looked like porcupine quills on his back now. Either way, it was strange that a porcupine could be thought of as fast. Looking at one of the destroyed robots, Izuku immediately went to inhale a piece of it. Unfortunately, a purple-haired boy accidentally stumbled into him, and this caused Izuku to eat one of his hairs, which had fallen off with a strand of his hair coming off in the process. This resulted in Izuku accidentally inhaling that instead, resulting in him turning into, well, something he hadn't turned into before. He had a baseball cap on his head again, but it was more tilted to the side, and his hands were glowing. He decided to see what he could do with this, and he realized that these were psychokinesis powers. He could lift stuff with his mind. Once he started throwing robots around and picking them up and chucking them, or just throwing psychic energy at them, he realized how kind of simple this power was. It wasn't really doing much for him, and despite the fact that he was destroying a lot of robots now, he felt like he needed a different power for this. So he ditched the power. As the star began bouncing around, it ended up landing on the boy who had given him the power in the first place. What Izuku didn't realize is that this power also affected his quirk. The boy now had his own, along with his quirk that he had before, which was brainwashing, now had psychokinesis along with it. He didn't know where it came from, because he didn't know that the star had touched him, but he knew that he could now actually do something. He guessed that his quirk evolved during the test or something. Izuku then recognized the girl that he saw from the entrance to UA, and called out to her, asking her if she had anything that he could use to power up. The girl reached into her pockets and pulled out multiple objects, including a large hammer that looked more like a mallet. She pointed at she gave him the hammer and asked if that could help, and Izuku said yes, to which he inhaled the hammer, to the girl's shock. A new hammer appeared in his hands, but unlike the one that she gave him, the hammer was wooden in color and had a star on both ends of it. He also had a weird bandana wrapped around his head. With the new hammer, he was able to do a lot more damage than he did before, being able to be surprisingly very agile with the hammer. He destroyed multiple robots with little to no effort. It wasn't until he saw a boy with an electric quirk and asked him if he could shoot the hammer in his hands. The boy gladly walked over, touched the hammer, and shocked it. The hammer then taking on a green electric-like hue to it. The hammer now did a lot more damage, and with every strike he did, it caused weird lightning bolts to hit wherever he struck, doing a lot more damage than he initially was planning on doing. The girl who was still with him, surprisingly, her powers were just as strange as his. She would jump up high and then land on the robots' heads, which actually blew them up surprisingly. Izuku asked her what would happen if she did that to a living human being. She said it would just be like an instant knockout for them, unless they were too big. The big ones took a few hits to actually knock out. It was then that the Zero Pointer showed up, and Izuku didn't know what to do. He felt like he needed to actually do something to help. He then noticed the boy from before, the boy that had the dragon quirk or whatever. Calling out to the boy looked and noticed him and called him over. The boy introduced himself as Minoru Mineta, and that they really needed to get out of there, as the Zero Pointer was right there. Izuku said that they needed to get rid of that thing so that nobody else got hurt. Mineta said he could easily take it out if he could reach the head, but his wings only allowed him to glide a short distance. Izuku scratched his chin for a minute before coming to a conclusion. Izuku looked at Mineta and said, "If you were launched towards it, could you actually do it? Hit it?" Mineta nodded his head and said, but he needed to actually be launched, and they didn't really have anything for that at the moment. Izuku thought otherwise as he opened his mouth and sucked Mineta into his mouth. Aiming at the zero pointer with his mouth, he shot Mineta out towards the zero pointer. Mineta was at first shocked that he got eaten, but then immediately realized what was going on and angled himself so that his horns would hit the zero pointer first. Slamming into the zero pointer, he went straight through the head, taking it offline right off the bat. Spreading his wings, he glided back down to where Midoriya was before telling him to warn him next time before he does something like that. Before Midoriya apologized to Mineta for as it was just more of a in the moment situation. Before he left, though, he noticed that a few of the robots still had some motherboards still, well, there were still some motherboards available that were not broken. So he went around and collected as many of them as he could. He wanted to see what kind of power he would get from them. He would collect up to about maybe 40 motherboards from the broken robots, and it wasn't until he got home that he would try one to see what it would turn him into. Although Izuku, realizing that he did end up accidentally eating somebody's hair, made him realize that he could possibly get different quirks or different powers depending on who if he ate someone's hair or if he ate someone's attack. So Izuku tried this with Katsuki, and it did give him a different quirk. Instead of giving him a power up, like turning him into Crash, which is what he started calling it, he got a weird wizard hat on his head, and he could just make bombs appear and then chuck them. He'd also roll them like a bowling ball. And surprisingly, the bombs can also be affected as well by the elemental attacks that his sword and yo-yo and hammer could do, which was surprising to Izuku, as he felt that could be more volatile than than he would like. But even though it wasn't, that kind of like disobeyed the laws of physics. But he wasn't complaining. Izuku was currently anticipating the wait for his acceptance letter. He didn't know if he was going to get in or not. He figured he had done enough, but he wanted to be, well, ready in case he did. He needed to train more, and he wanted to train with his first ever copy ability he got, the sword. However, upon trying to inhale one of his many collection of box cutters that he had collected just for this kind of thing, because he knew that he would lose whatever he inhaled after inhaling it. He decided to when he tried to inhale it, though, a butterfly had flew right in front of his face, and he ended up inhaling that too. Upon doing so, his sword form looked different. His sword was different. He had a mask, and he had a weird helmet instead of a elf-looking hat, and he had 2 butterfly wings coming out of his back. This kind of shocked him for a minute, because he realized that he just ate a living creature while it was still alive. He was nervous. He was distraught at first after accidentally killing a creature, but then he realized that, well, there's no use crying about it when it already happened, and besides, butterflies die every day anyway, so he decided to try out these new abilities. The surprising part is that every time he would slash with the sword, a beam of fire would shoot out of the blade, which kind of shocked him, as that wasn't something he really expected to happen. He tried charging it up like he did before, only when he fully charged it this time, instead of him being... The charge lasted for a lot longer this time, and turned his sword giant. As he swung the sword down, it created a flaming tornado. And the blades... and the waves of fire that he shot out of his sword were a lot bigger as well. He could still do the spin thing, but the big sword thing was very interesting, and he liked it. He tried multiple other things too. He tried to see if he could fly with the butterfly wings, and surprisingly he could. Just ignore the little puffball thing on the screen. I'm talking about the actual wings. His wings allowed him to fly a lot better than he could before. He tried multiple other things too. Hold on a second. How do I do this one? Oh wait. Here we go. Yeah, that's how I do it. He decided to try a different kind of charge, and he held the sword with both hands. This surprisingly summoned two large, weird, spectral-like things that swirled around him for a minute before he focused on one thing and they both charged at it, doing a lot of damage to it. While he was in the air, he decided to charge up the sword again, but instead of the sword charging up, his wings began charging up. How do I do this? Oh yeah. As they charged up, he released it, and a shockwave was unleashed from his wings. This was new. He didn't realize that he could absorb two things at once, and it could affect his abilities. Although he didn't really know how it worked exactly, he knew that it was a strange new version of his power. Deciding that it was time to go home, he turned around to head in that direction, only for him to disappear and reappear in his room. He was shocked at the fact that he could teleport too in this form. This new form was powerful. If he could just teleport wherever he wanted, he would never be late to school again, and he could just teleport to where he wanted where he wanted to go in case there was a certain villain attack. However, he realized that he wouldn't actually be able to use this power very often, as it wasn't every day that a butterfly just ran in the way of you eating a knife. But he hoped that maybe that time would come up again. Oh yeah, and the sludge villain incident never happened in this universe. All Might did end up catching him before he actually got to anybody else. Hearing about this, Bakugo wanted to go and help Izuku try out these new abilities. So Bakugo went to the store to buy certain tools. He figured he could get more of what they needed from a hardware store. So he bought multiple tools, including drills, screwdrivers, other kinds of things like that. The first thing they tried was a drill, which surprisingly gave Izuku a power. Just formed a weird drill thing on his head, with some goggles to block from running into anything underground. He could dig underground with it and just stay there. When he would come out, it would cause several rocks to fly everywhere at the same time, but only if he was under there for a certain amount of time. He could also use it as a charge way to sort of like launch himself forward and then back into the ground again. As cool as this was, though, this meant that Izuku only had a few different kinds of ways to use this. He realized that he could shoot projectiles from it, though. Only a little distance, though, not very far. Spitting out the ability, Bakugo decided that they should try inhaling the drill on something else. So they did it again, only this time Bakugo put a pencil in front of Izuku's mouth. Izuku giving him the "really" look as he was doing it. Surprisingly, though, this did affect him, and his drill turned into what looked like a pencil sharpener with a pencil sticking out of the front of it. And the most surprising part was that this time when he dug underground, instead of what normally happened, a pencil would shoot out, and then another pencil would shoot out of the ground with him, and go after the nearest target. That being Bakugo, who felt like this was some sort of karma for making Izuku eat a pencil. They also invited a few of their new friends over, being Ida and Uraraka. They decided they wanted to help Izuku try out new abilities that he could possibly have. Uraraka actually showed that she had a fire ability, but only worked when she ate a flower that was orange. It would give her fire powers, and it would also change her clothes to a orange and white color for some reason. This was very helpful because this meant Izuku could see if he could actually get some fire powers for once, which he did. He could breathe fire now, like his dad. He could turn into a fireball and launch himself at people. He'd also turn himself into a literal spinning ball of fire as well. I can't show that in this game, though, because you can't do that in this one, for some reason. Mineta also showed up a bit later, being quite surprised at the now flaming-headed Izuku. He decided that he wanted to see what would happen if Izuku ate his fire, which he could breathe out of his mouth. Mineta did so, and Izuku absorbed it, but this time, instead of the fire being orange, the fire on his head was purple, and it looked like a dragon claw was on his head. And he had two wings poking out of the sides of his head. When he tried to fly, surprisingly, he was able the fire when he tried to do the fireball attack again, this time instead of turning into a fireball, the wings on two flaming wings appeared on his head and he began to fly, like actually began to fly. He tried out his fire breath and turned out it was a lot more powerful than it was before. It had more range and did, well, a lot more damage. It was a lot more concentrated, and he could burn through a tree without actually burning it up. Like, just cut through it like as though he was using a pressurized hose. Uraraka reached into her pocket again and pulled out a boomerang. Izuku really didn't know where she was getting these from, but she then decided to hand it over to Izuku, who inhaled it. Uraraka, thinking that this would cause him to have the same kind of power-up she would have, as her power-ups could affect other people. But she was the one that got the other benefits out of it. However, when Izuku absorbed the boomerang, instead of turning into the same thing Uraraka has, which was surprisingly silly, he had a weird hat on his head, and he would pull off the little blade on the top of the hat and throw it like a boomerang. It was razor sharp too, and would do a lot of damage. After throwing it, he could also charge it up briefly, and then jump over it, and it would be a lot more powerful. Izuku was very excited for that prospect, but he wanted to try something else. He spit out the boomerang, grabbing it in the air before it would actually get lost again, instead of like trying to take the copy power back, and instead decided to inhale that while also inhaling a razor sharp blade. This resulted in a different kind of hat with two what looked like chakrams on his head. He could throw both at once, and they actually did quite a bit of damage too. But he could only charge one at a time, which was rather unfortunate for him. He really wanted to be able to charge both at the same time, but at least he could throw two of them at once now instead of just one. Eventually, everybody had to go home, but they were excited that they were hopefully going to make it into UA. A few days later, everyone got their acceptance letters, and they were all allowed in, with Izuku getting the highest score, even higher than All Might, which surprised him. Along with the rescue points were a big help, though. Unbeknownst to him, however, the teachers that had watched Izuku's performance had been really impressed with him as well as a few other students. All Might, especially, was very interested in Izuku, as the way he acted in the field of battle, the way he behaved, was very heroic, very much worthy of One for All. He decided to keep a closer eye on Izuku to see if he was truly worthy to inherit his power. And that is where we'll end this part. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and I will see you for the next one. And before we go, let's do one final cutter on Mr. Sandbag over here. There we go.